Obviously, today we have a special guest in Abby Donnelly. She's the founder of the Leadership and Legacy Group, and she works closely with business owners and C-suite leaders on leadership and the people side of succession and exit. Today, Abby's going to focus on concepts from her recent book, An Insider's Guide to Succession and Exit. Without further ado, Abby, I'll hand it over to you. Thanks for being here, everyone.
All right, super. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to meet with all of you. I know that Jen is going to be monitoring questions, so jump in and ask any questions if you've got them. And then we'll have a little bit of time at the end also to cover questions. So what I wanted to start with is giving you a sense of why this whole succession planning and exit process is so difficult. And in general, any of you that work in the industry with owners who are going through succession and exit, you probably know that selling is hard. And whether you're selling to a third party or you're selling to a family member or key employees, it's hard. You've got to find the right buyer or the right successor. You've got to find somebody that's going to value the culture that you've spent your entire career building. You've got to find somebody that really is going to appreciate and respect the people that you've built, developed in your business. And you've also got to find somebody who is going to carry on the business in the way that you want your legacy to play out. Selling is also hard because it requires a change. And we know that change that is not initiated by us is difficult, but even change that is initiated by us, like a succession plan, is also difficult. Owners also often have their identity in the business. And so it's particularly difficult for them to separate from it because who are they without their business? And then another reason that it's particularly difficult is that there are all of these financial considerations that they need to take into account. So they need to make sure that they're going to get enough money to serve their retirement, but also enough money to feel like it was a fair deal for them. And so all of those contribute, and there are probably others that contribute as well. These are the main ones that I see in my work. All of these contribute to making transitions a really messy process. And the one challenge that every owner is going to face that goes through this is it is emotional. And this morning, I was sitting down with a client that I've been working with for about 5 years. And they've been going through the transition process and the succession has taken place. So all the announcements are made, people are in their new roles. And one of the things he said to me in front of his colleague is that even though they have prepared for this for a couple of years, he had no idea just how difficult it was going to be because the process is emotional no matter what. There's a lot that owners have invested in it, and you have to go through it to get to the other side. So they're messy and it's emotional. So what I want to do with you today is I want to give you some tools and some direction on how you can guide your clients through the succession process on the non-financial side. So I don't really do a whole lot with the financials. My focus is really on the leadership, the business, the strategic, and the talent development opportunities that business owners need to focus on when they're going through this process. And it plays out whether they're going to sell to a third party or they're going to do something internal, a family member or key employee. But it is typically a little bit more focused. My work is a little bit more focused on those that are doing a succession. So the first thing I wanted to share with you is the importance of figuring out what really matters most. And if you ask most owners what matters most, what I think you're going to find is that they'll say, I need to get a fair deal. It's going to be something around the financial aspects of it. But most of them need a whole lot more than that. They do want a fair deal, so you can't ignore that. But what they're really interested in is some of the deeper components that matter about their legacy and about what's going to drive the business moving forward. So some of the things that I hear when I really dig in a little bit deeper about what matters most is that they want to find a family member or a key employee who they can turn the business over to, that they really trust, that they know is going to do a good job. And it's not just delivering on the performance outcomes that are important to them. The results matter, but it's also about making sure that they are going to sustain the culture, as I talked about earlier, that they're going to feel like this business is a part of their legacy as well as they move into those roles. And that the owner is going to be capable, the successor is going to be capable of doing what needs to be done in the time frame that they've got laid out. So they want to have confidence in the new owner. They may want to have a role in the future business. So it's not mandatory that they do, some don't, but many of them want to make sure that they have a role that is going to add value and is not going to get in the successor's way. They also want to figure out what their identity is going to be in their next chapter. Because as they transition out of the business, their relationships will change, their community engagement will change, their role in the company will change. And so having some new identity in their next chapter really matters to many of them. They also want to sustain some relationships that are important to them that may have been built from the work that they've done in the business, but also may be important to them after they're no longer in the business. Some of the other things that I hear is what I call creating a portfolio life plan. And so figuring out what that next chapter is going to look like beyond their identity in it. What are they going to do every day? What are their day-to-day activities going to look like? And so helping them figure out what is it that matters most. And if you can help them figure that out, that can create a dramatic confidence building piece and direction for them to move forward. If they know what their future role is going to be in the business and they can define that with some very clear boundaries, that can really put them at ease, much more so than if they feel like they're being pushed out, which I think many owners start to feel like as they're working with successors in the business. So I find that getting clarity on what matters most reduces the emotional roller coaster. I also find that most owners can't figure that out themselves. It's not because they're not smart, talented people, but it's because there's so much going on that they're trying to figure out, and this is all new to them. Most of them have never sold a business before. They've never transitioned out. And so they need some outside guidance. And I think advisors, like each of you, are in a wonderful position to be able to help them on that. So that's one of the first steps that I recommend, is figuring out what matters most. One of the important stages that they need to move into pretty quickly is what I call successor readiness. And so making sure that they've got a successor that is prepared to take over and run the company, at least the day-to-day business, by the time they are ready to ramp down. And I would argue that even if an owner is planning to sell to a third party, they still will benefit by building a really strong leadership team and having a strong successor in place, because it will minimize the earnout that they have. Potentially, it will also give them a likely higher price on the sale of the company. So this is good work for them to do no matter what. But it's often most owners that I have interacted with feel like the successor readiness is really based on following me around. And I'm going to give you some recommendations on how to do that differently. I'll give you an example of a situation that I had a number of years ago. I was working on the board of a bank that was going through a succession planning process, and they had two options. They could sell the company, or they could turn it over to key employees that would run the business. And when I asked how they were planning to develop that successor readiness, one of the things that they mentioned is that they were just going to have the successor follow them around and watch what they do. And I asked them what were some of the most critical leadership responsibilities that they would need the successor to be able to do. And an example that they gave me was, they said, well, we go down to lobby the state legislators on a quarterly basis about the things that are important for banking. And so what I was planning on doing with our successors is having them come with me and watch me lobby the legislators and see what I do. And then they'll kind of get the sense of what it's like. And what I recommended instead, because giving people an experience and a task to do that's relevant and intentional is going to develop them far better than having them watch. And so what I recommended instead was that the CEO identify what are the most critical topics that he needs to lobby the legislators for this quarter. And then he assign them to each of the successors that he's working with, or the candidates for succession. And he gives them a little bit of background on it, and then they go away and put together their pitch for the lobbyist. And then about a week before the trip to the state legislature, they come back and they pitch to him, and he gives them feedback on it and helps them kind of fine tune their pitch or, improve it. And then he goes with them to the state legislature and sits down with the lobbyist, and then they do their pitch, and he's there. He can supplement it if they need it, but they're doing the work. They've prepared, they've been coached, now they're delivering. And then on the drive back, they debrief on how did it go. So you can see the difference between his approach initially and the approach that I recommended. It would be dramatically more powerful for their learning curve. So intentional development is what I advocate for in terms of successor readiness. The timeline for that is generally 3 to 5 years. The research shows that it takes 3 to 5 years to move a successor from an executive level into the CEO role. So you can't just decide that you want to retire in a year and expect that successor to be ready unless you've already been working on this. One of the tools that I use around readiness, in addition to identifying what are all the things that successor needs to be able to do for you to have confidence as an owner that they're going to be able to take over and run the company, is I ask them to think about what does the successor need to know? In other words, intellectual knowledge. What do they need to show? In other words, what do they need to demonstrate in order for this owner to know and have confidence that they're ready? What do they need to be able to do? So that's the third one. What do they need to be able to demonstrate that they are capable of doing? And then the last one is, what do they need to deliver? So giving them a set of results that you expect them to deliver would be that last piece of it. So know, show, do, and deliver. And if an owner can put that list together, maybe with your help, then they know exactly what it is that they need to develop through that intentional development model. And if they do it early enough, they'll have 3 to 5 years to be able to build that in so that their successor is fully prepared. Now, one of the things that happens a lot is that owners like to move the goal line. And when you move the goal line, you've got a successor that's been working really hard trying to prove themselves to their owner that I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready. I know, I've shown, I've done, and I've delivered. And then the owner gets a little bit of cold feet and starts seeing things. Well, but you haven't done this yet, and you haven't done that yet. And they move the goal line. And so my recommendation is to continue to reinforce to them that moving the goal line, unless it's a major issue, can be really demoralizing for the successor. Once you've got the successor sort of in process for development, then, of course, you've got to look at your daisy chain. And the daisy chain, my definition, is where everyone in the organization then will be taking on more responsibility. So as you're moving your successor into that key leadership role as president or CEO, somebody needs to backfill them. And as you're taking the whole executive team up and developing them, somebody needs to backfill them. And so one of the tools that I really like that's a pretty easy to use tool, and I'm happy to send anyone a copy of it who wants it. It's called a 9-box. Anyone heard of a 9-box before? Okay. Yeah, I know Tim has, because we've worked on that. And so a 9-box is a pretty straightforward tool. Imagine a tic-tac-toe board. And so you've got 9 boxes, and on one scale, you put performance, okay? So you can have low performer, you can have medium performer, and you can have high performer. And on the other scale, you have potential. So you can have low potential, medium potential, and you can have high potential. And so the 9-box shows you where people will fall in your organization. So you as an owner, or not you as an owner, but your owners can do this exercise by themselves, or they can do it with their executive team for the next level down. And the way that it works is that in the top corner where you've got high performance but low potential, those are folks that are doing a really good job in their role they're in, and you want to keep them there and keep them happy. The folks that are in the high potential but low performance are probably in the wrong role. They may be in the wrong company, but they're at least in the wrong role. And so you want to find them a role where they can really show their potential and get better results, so that they can improve their performance as well. The folks that are in the top right corner, they're the ones that have high potential and high performance. So you want to really invest in their development, because they're rock stars. And then the ones that are in the bottom left corner that are low potential and low performance, it's probably time to help them find happiness elsewhere. So those are all different ways that you can use the 9-box. And then the boxes that are in the medium or medium high, those are great opportunities to develop people as well, because they've got good growth potential, or they are good performers that could be made great performers. So that's a tool that you can use to assess the daisy chain that you need to grow beyond you. Okay. The other thing around successor readiness, I've had so many examples of successors that come in and they have a really exciting vision. You know, they're technically savvy. They have, you know, the world at their fingertips with the internet access that maybe their owners didn't have at that same age. They've got big dreams and big ideas. And so helping them move through a strategic planning process with the owner, successor, and the leadership team can be a very powerful way of getting everyone on the same page about what the future is going to look like. What's important, of course, is that you have a successor who owns the plan, because they're going to need to execute against it. They have the skills to execute it, and the owner can support it. What I often find, I've got a past client that I worked with, and the successor was fantastic, big visionary leader. The owner started the company 30 years ago and was super excited about his son coming into the business. And so the son was talking these big ideas. And when we actually looked at what it was going to take to implement those, the resources required were massive. He not only needed more people at higher levels on the leadership team, but he also needed to have a really, really strong financial base to be able to make these investments in technology and in other kinds of, potentially M&A, doing some acquisitions or something like that. And so there was this real disconnect between the owner and his successor about that strategic plan. And one of the statements that I love in my book is where we're going through this the strategic planning process. And I talk about how the successor wants to build these big, exciting plans with your money. So they want to build it with the owner's money. But if the owner is financing the sale of their business, there often isn't enough money to fully invest in a big vision and strategic plan and sell it to the successor. So oftentimes we've got to figure out how to do that in phases that keep the owner happy and receiving their payout, but also keep the successor excited about what they're doing and that growth potential. The last piece that I want to talk about is around owner readiness. And this is a really critical piece. If the owner isn't ready, they're not going to go. And, owners they're living longer lives, which is wonderful. And many of them are putting off leaving the business. If they can find a good fit role for themselves, great, because that will help them stay connected in a way that's meaningful for them. But owner readiness is really tough. So some of the ways that I go about that, I'll share with you the approach that I use is I try to work with them to help them shift their identity by discovering what a meaningful and rewarding next chapter is. And the tool I use, and it's in my book, is called the Portfolio Life Plan. And what it's really about is there's two phases to it. And phase one is helping the owner do some introspective work, helping them figure out what are their favorite strengths, because at that point in their career and life, they don't want to have to use strengths that they don't love. So what are their favorite strengths? What are they passionate about? And if you ask most owners what they're passionate about, they don't know, but there are some tools that I cover in the book, and I'm happy to share with people to help them figure out what they're passionate about. And then the last one on the introspective side is what are their lifestyle priorities? Some owners that I've worked with have said, the only thing that's important to me from a lifestyle priority perspective is I have been waking up at 5:30 every day, every workday for the last 40 years. I just like to sleep in till 6:30. And that's it for them. Others say, I want to travel. If you ask most owners what they want to do in their next chapter, the typical answer, and I've done this in front of thousands of people, is I want to travel more, I want to spend more time with my family, and I want to play a lot more golf. Every once in a while, they'll say tennis. But that's not typically enough. They really need something that's going to be meaningful. So I take them through the first phase of that process to really get to what are those passions, favorite strengths, and lifestyle priorities. And then we move into the next phase where they create a narrative that talks about, loosely where they are. And then they get out and they start doing some exploration. So I have them do what I call an intrigue list. And the intrigue list is anything, any topic, any people, any organizations that intrigue them, anything that seems interesting to them. And with their narrative that now defines the scope of what they think they want to do, they can get out there and set up meetings with people that are interesting to them. And they set up the meeting with the caveat that I'm at a stage in my career where I'm starting to explore opportunities. This is what I know about myself. I know I love this. I know I'm passionate about that. I know I'm good at these things. And I'm looking for the right fit next set of opportunities that will really engage me, where I can stay relevant. And relevance is the most used word that I hear from owners. So with that, they can start having those conversations. And what invariably happens is they discover some things that they don't want to do, but they're not pulled into it unnecessarily, because they've got their plan for what they want to, what matters to them. If they didn't do the introspective work, then other people would come and say, hey, I know you're interested in this nonprofit, come volunteer for us. And they may not want to do that. I've got lots and lots of examples of owners and CEOs that as soon as their retirement was announced, or as soon as they announced that they were exiting their business, all kinds of people came running to try to give them stuff to do in their free time. And it was hard for them to say no, because they hadn't done the introspective work to say, what do I really want to do? And it was hard for them to tell people no, because they'd always been able to either blame it on the business, or they've always been able to say, that's not the kind of work that I want to do. But now they don't have an excuse, because they have all kinds of time on their hands. So this process really helps them to be very choiceful and intentional, but also create a really exciting and rewarding next chapter. So often when I'm doing this work on the exit side with owners, they'll complain that they don't want to be pushed out. And this process gives them a place and a way to stay connected with the business, because it'll open up some really clear role opportunities. I'll give you a quick example. I worked with a client years ago who I asked him, if you were to work for free, what would you want to do in your business? And he looked at me kind of surprised and he said, oh, what an interesting question. And he went away and did the homework, and he came back and he said, I love developing people. I didn't have as much time for it deeper in the organization when I was in my CEO role, but I could have time for it now. And he actually took a job with his company reporting to the HR manager, and his function was to develop people. And it was a win for everybody, because the new CEO was not going to have any more time than he had, probably less, because they were still new in the role. But they were able to work out those boundaries and clear distinctions. And it was exciting for him. He did that for about 3 years, and he got the next daisy chain into the next level leadership. So anyway, let me pause here and see if there are any questions that I can answer for anybody. I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, anyone can feel
Question?
free to unmute themselves if you have a question.
Yeah, Ray?
Yeah, you referred to this daisy chain. I'm not sure what that is.
So it's when you move somebody up to the next level. The daisy chain is, how do you backfill that role? So it's the promotion, or it's the promotion of the next level, so that you always have candidates that, continue to grow and do the next level of work. That term actually, I learned it when I was at Procter & Gamble. We used to call it the daisy chain. So I incorporated that in as well. Any other questions?
Thank you.
So, yeah, you're welcome. So what I would love is if this is interesting to you, I have a newsletter list that I'm happy to put you on. It's a weekly tip. It takes, I don't know, somewhere between 30 and 60 seconds to read. And if you'd like to be on it, that's all I really ever do with it. I don't do any promotions. I don't sell any lists or anything like that. But if you'd like to, you can either send me an email. I know Michael's going to put my contact information out to all of you, or you can put it in the chat and I will get back to you. And if questions come up outside of, this 30 minutes that we have together, I'm happy to answer any of them via email, or you can give me a call. Happy to help you figure out how to do this with your clients.
And any last minute questions for us here? Yeah, Ray, go for it.
I've got your first book, the Straight Talk.
Yep.
What is your second book cover that's not in the first book?
So this is the second book. It goes into a lot more depth on many of the things I talk about in the first book, and it expands upon it, creating a set of principles and a process for any owner to follow if they want to move through this on the, leadership business strategies, culture side. So I made the second book more like a how-to manual, so that you can get through it. The second book also talks a lot more about the emotions that owners go through, not directly, because that's not always a happy, comfortable topic, but it definitely puts it out there a little bit more. Thanks for asking.
Thank you.
All right, well, we are right at 12:30, so I appreciate everyone coming today. And like I said, please reach out if I can help you. I'm happy to do that by email or phone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Abby. And thank you everyone for being here today. I'll make sure you get Tim, do you have a